Hi guys, in this video, I've left everything to the last minute, so we're going to have to do some speed painting.
Gruffy Crow.
So, you may have seen, well, a lot of you watching this, although the event has already gone, on the 19th of August, I'm having a Oathmark Games Day. We've got a good number of players coming, and the scenarios are going to require a certain amount of miniatures. So each table is having a well at some point, and we're going to need a Witch King, and we're going to need some Necromancers. I have finally got everything printed out for enough players, but as you can see, they are very much not painted. So I've done a video painting this model before, and it took me a while. It's a big, even though these are scaled down versions, it's quite a complex model. It is from Warp Miniatures. I'll put a link in the description, and it's a lovely figure, and it fits exactly what I needed. And these are them on 50mm bases, but it is going to take me a little time to paint, so we're going to have to find a way to get those painted in as little time as humanly possible and still have them look half decent on the table. So on top of that, we have a selection of Necromancers, and once again, I'm less bothered about these, but I still want them to look somewhat half decent on the table on the day. And one of the problems I've got with those is I'm going to want about 5 per table, and the majority of them currently look like this. And I have almost exactly a week to go. These guys are Cultists from Victus, and for each one we've got a body, a head, and a pair of arms. And I've literally just picked the arms that are holding sort of spell effects. And I have just this moment realised that all of the arms I have here are right arms. I've not printed any left arms off. That's going to be an issue. So I'm going to quickly run some left arms off, and we'll get these guys painted. But in theory, yeah, we're going to have a head and 2 arms for each side. And we're just going to go for either a bare hand or a little dagger or something in one hand, and a fireball in the other. And I'm not going to mess around too much with the basing. I've just got some of these leftover rendered bases, and I'm just going to stick some regular sand on, and yeah, undercoat them grey. Okay, I'm back on track. We've got a fresh set of left arms, fresh off the printer, so let's get these guys built. Okay, that didn't take too long. So now we've got 25 of these guys to go with 5 of these guys. And to say we were only working with a limited number of heads and bodies and arms and stuff, I think we've got quite a few cool varied poses. They all look relatively different and like they're in action. In hindsight, I should have flipped half the bodies like the other way around. That would have given me even more variation for free. But yeah, these will be fine. So obviously the next step is going to be to spray them up just with some standard Halford's primer. And then we're going to dry brush these puppies in basically the brightest white I have ever owned from, what is it? Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White. This is a super bright white, so this will give me masses of contrast straight away, and it's really pigmented, so it'll go on quite nicely as a dry brush, I think. I've not tried dry brushing with it yet, but that's what I'm hoping. And I'm going to dry brush all of them like that, and we're going to try and do a sort of slap chop method of painting these guys, mostly using contrast paints. Okay, so we have a massive craft brush here, and we're using this for the dry brushing on these guys. And we're taking them from this to basically this. So leaving plenty of that original grey and getting good contrast. I see these slap chop videos where they do a couple of different ones, but we don't have time for that. The objective here is to create as much contrast in as little time as possible. And the same should go for the big fella. Look at that, the difference. Beautiful. Except I have just got too carried away and completely snapped this staff off. These were done in a very flexible resin, but apparently not flexible enough to survive absolutely thrashing them with this brush. But that's fine. The main bit we want to do on the front here, we've really brought out all that contrast, and that'll glue back on no problem. And one of the things I do like about printer resin is that glue join will probably hold about as well as any of the resin in there. And because it was a quite clean break, that's gone back on with minimal marks. You probably wouldn't even be able to spot that unless you knew where to look. So, disaster averted, because I didn't want to have to print another one of these. So I'm going to zoom around, finish dry brushing the rest of the little guys and the big guys a little bit more gently. And then we'll move on to some washes and contrast paints. Okay, so now I've dry brushed everything. I've started having to play around with some contrast paints. The necromancers I'm going to have in red. And I think pretty much everything that's not skin or weapons is going to be this flesh tearers red. I'm just going to go straight in with that. I have tried some different levels of sort of watering it down. But other than just making it flow a little bit better, I'm not going to water it down as much as that again. That is fine. I think that looks good. And like normally, obviously, we'd go and paint like a little bit of like the rope and stuff like that, all different colours. I'm not going to bother in this instance. We're going to try and keep it all as simple as possible. So it won't take me long to get that main colour on all of these. With the big guy, we're going to play with the contrast paints again. And we've got some thin down Gilliman flesh on the sort of leg and arms and hands there. I think that is sufficient. And then this is the Black Templar. Spend a little bit more time to be careful around where the two colours meet. Not always done the best job, but once again, shouldn't take too long, especially with a brush this sort of size, which is what I was using, because it's quite because it sort of holds quite a lot of liquid to get into all these places. So I've only done one so far because I just wanted to see how it would look when it was dry. But that is enough shading and low lights, I think, for me. I said for the purpose of getting these ready for the competition. So I'll go ahead and do those two contrasts on these guys as well. I might even go as far as to just tie these guys in a bit, do the book here in the red as well. Honestly, I got to this stage and part of me thought that if we were doing Witch Ghosts, we were kind of there. That's a lovely amount of contrast and it really brings out the details. Yeah, it's pretty cool already. Okay, so all of our cultists look like this and all of our liches look like this. I think these guys mostly we just need some metal on these ones, and I think that will more or less, we're just going to do some sort of silver on the shoulders, around the waist, probably the whole staff, the sword. I think that pretty much covers it, and then we just do a little bit of work on the book maybe, and we're done. These guys, the only other bits we're really going to pick up is going to be skin and then the fire. Obviously, you could pick up 10 times more different colours and details on these, but I'm liking the idea of keeping them nice and simple. The other thing you might notice is different is all the bases. I did start off doing these in like Rhinox hide and ended up, quite quickly in fact, switching to this Crafter's Choice paint, just so I could thin it down, because this does thin down quite well and still work quite nicely, and really just slap it on, because I'm not worried about obscuring details on these bases. And actually, if anything, a thicker coat of paint helps keep the sand sort of sealed in. And looking at how much paint I actually used on these when I was sort of putting it out onto my palette, I probably used an entire Games Workshop size pot of paint, which is obviously a lot cheaper if I use this, which I usually reserve for sort of terrain and things like that. But yeah, if you can find these ones, these are quite good. So my plan is to pop to Element Games today on my lunch break and see if such a thing exists that is a one coat metallic paint. And my next step other than that is going to be to paint skin on all of the sort of hands, feet, faces of these guys. Okay, so I made some progress on the wells. I think they're pretty much all done, which are for one of the scenarios. So we'll go back to the minis for a bit. The next biggest colour on these guys is going to be skin. So I had a quick look on Games Workshop's website about how they recommended speed painting skin, and they started with Wraithbone, which is a colour I've been meaning to pick up for a while, so I grabbed that on my lunch. And they paired that with the Gilliman Flesh, which needs a bit of a mix. So I'm just going to trust the process and go with these now. Now I am thinking if I had been a bit more careful with the red, we could have probably got away with just dumping the Gilliman Flesh if we're using it over the original undercoat. But this slight off-white should give us a slightly warmer colour. And I don't think it's going to take me too long just to go and fill out these hands and faces. Unfortunately, they had sold out of the Enchanted Silver Contrast Speedpaint Army Painter paint that I wanted in Element today. But I might still be able to get some of them before the end, before it's too late. So we'll see how that goes. So it's just gone 6 o'clock now. So tonight I'm going to say I want all the skin done on my little guys, and that's going to be my goal for this evening. And I might take a look at the book as well on these guys' waists here, and then that should just leave metal parts on the most part left to do. One thing I will say is I really like my Rosemary & Co brushes. They're my favourite sort of for regular painting. But for getting these base coats down, I actually do prefer a Games Workshop brush. These Rosemary & Co brushes will hold the tip long after I've rubbed all the paint off the writing and everything like that. They are lovely brushes for sort of good detail work and sort of shading and stuff. This I know for a fact won't hold the tip for very long, but I have found these much better for laying down these base layers quickly, and I think it's just because it's got that bit more stiffness and a slightly shorter. This is actually a base brush. I'm not always their biggest Games Workshop fan, but what I will say is I can't lie that their base paints and their brushes, as I said, and their washers make getting basic paints down on a model about as easy as it can be, I think. Okay, I still haven't received my speed paint, but tonight's layers are going to be, we've got some more of this titanium white, and I'm just doing the little flames in their hands in that, so it all looks like they're holding a handful of Mr. Whippy. I've got that thinned down with a bit of medium, so this is going quite quickly. It's interesting actually, I've never really used the Lamian medium before, other than just to make things matte that I'd accidentally made too shiny. But when I was painting the Wraithbone on, that would not water down with regular water. It was just not going very nicely. But with I'm kind of sold on using the medium now. It is making this paint also quite a lot smoother. I really want to point out that these guys have some really fantastic faces. A lot of the Vivixits miniatures do. So at some point I'm going to have to revisit some of these miniatures and really try and do them justice. I did recently print this Mordheim character just for some funsies. Also absolutely fantastic face. Really nice mini. So I have to paint this guy with my best ability to make up for speed painting these guys so cruelly. We are going to do some bits to improve these bases. I had a go with the Crafter's Choice creamy sort of ivory colour, and I didn't like it at all. It was too plain. But what we've got here is a tester pot from Wilco of nutmeg spice, and we're going to use that. So just got an old scrubby makeup brush here. I'm just going to give that a bit of a rough and ready dry brush. Pick out some of these like rocks and the sort of texture of the sand, and even catch the edges of this sort of rock that's built into the model. Once again, this is the sort of paint I use all the time for sort of larger terrain bits, where it'd be sort of uneconomical to paint the whole thing with the standard model paint. And I'm trying to do this nice and quick and easily, but I have just messed up pretty badly. But that's not too much of a mistake. I'm just going to finish off the rest of the base, and we are going to put grass on this in a second, so we can just fix it when we do that. And I'm going to be using the exact same technique and the exact same giant brush on these guys. And the good thing is, if we get any of this sort of mud colour on the sort of around their ankles or on their feet, that's just weathering. And I totally meant to do it. And once the bases are dried, I'm just going to shoot round with a bit of black and just neaten up those base edges, because I think that adds quite a lot to even quite a quickly painted model. Same on the big guys. Okay, so now the little Mr. Whippies have dried in their hands. I'm just using another contrast, this time Warp Lightning, and I'm just going to dab that over there, not worrying too much about overflow, because it's just going to give extra sort of shading. I'm going to be quite light, almost like a glaze, rather than like the way I've used the contrast in other places. And that's their little magical balls of fire. Okay, with the flames in place, paint-wise, a number of these are complete now. Okay, so I got my hands on some of the metallic speed paint. So I'm going to try that out now on the big guy. That is impressively runny. And it's definitely quick to apply. Let's get some details filled in, see how it looks. I'm loving the colour, it's definitely perfect for this. It's got a bit of a blue tint to it. There's not a great deal of variation in tone, but it is actually... But I am getting a similar result to if I'd done a base metal and then a wash. So, it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, I'm really happy with the way that's come out. Really nice blue colour. We've got good contrast in some of these bits. And that was super quick to apply, like nothing I've ever painted before. Kind of went on almost like a wash, but complete coverage. And some of these detail parts are looking really nice. So I'm just going to do that again 4 more times. Okay, so all the big guys done. I'm pretty happy with them. If I've got time, I'm just going to go back and do the hair and some of these book pages. But otherwise, I think at sort of 4-foot tabletop rules, they're fine. So a finishing touch on these guys is I'm going to add some grass to the bases. This is the grass I usually use. This is like a spring summery sort of mix. I think that's a bit too lively for these guys. So a while back I accidentally bought far too much of this medium green, which is a little bit more dour, and I think that's going to fit these guys a bit better. And I have tons of it. And we're not going to mess around sticking this down. We're going to get plenty of PVA ready and a huge brush. And that should allow me just to dollop on just random spots, and then he can go into the tray and we'll just throw some grass at him. I'll do a whole bunch of these and then just shake it off, quick blow, and that's some bases done as well. And I think that adds just enough interest for them to blend in the table with a bit better, and won't take too long at all. If I get time, there's a couple more bits I want to touch up, like the hair. I could make that stand out maybe in white, and do something with these pages. But I've got 5 of those done, 25 cultists, and I've got my 3 shrines finished for the first scenario. So I'm basically all ready to go for tomorrow now for the Oathmark tournament. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to take another single photo or video of my models after this point. I did spend the evening setting up all the tables and carrying terrain over to the venue, and then the event started first thing next morning. Thankfully, some of the players did manage to snap a few photos, including some of the models I painted. The event went super smoothly. It was a great bunch of people. Everyone seemed to have a really good time, and it was great to see so many Oathmark players and armies all in the same place at the same time. And I'll definitely do one of these again, but maybe next time I won't plan to paint so many miniatures for it. Either that, or maybe I just won't leave it to the last moment.